Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Mike Trocchia, and accompanied by my teammates, Josie Bray, Nicholas Peterson, Emily Piazza, and Aaron Wainwright. This is the Lean Six Sigma Dojo Masters of the Arts presentation on the costs, literal and metaphorical, of poor quality for Boeing's recall of their 737 MAX plane model. Additionally, this presentation will cover current events in terms of the coronavirus's assault and hampering of Boeing's redemption campaign. Fortunately, muda reduction, efficiency in production, and quality functions is our motto, as we not only aim to please, but redefine expectations in their entirety. If this presentation does not put a smile on your face, intrigue your insights, or inspire you to follow your dreams, then I strongly suggest getting your mind out of the everyday traffic and into the dojo speed lane. With that, please enjoy, sit back, relax, grab a drink, if of age of course, and enjoy the Solution Smithing Show. Now, to give you all a little bit of background on who we are, this slide was put together to show you all that we are not strangers and are, in fact, equal and integral components of our Lean Six Sigma dojo, and can not only be your friend, but a potential valuable business partner. That being said, here are our stories.
Hi, my name is Emily Piazza. I'm a production planner for an aerospace company. I have 2 young sons and have been spending a lot of time chasing them around the house lately. Soon I'll be discussing the 737 timeline and how it has affected Boeing's COPQ.
Hello, Professor and class. My name is Nick, and I work as a procurement buyer in New York City. When I'm not busy honing my Six Sigma mindset, I enjoy playing guitar and cooking. I'm one of the co-founders of the Lean Six Sigma Dojo, and in a few minutes I'll be presenting the issues and faults that troubled Boeing's 737 MAX, and I'll be using a fault tree and the voice of the customer to illustrate my points.
Hello, my name is Josie Bray. I currently work as an intermodal product analyst. Later in the presentation, I'll be talking about how the Boeing 737 MAX crashes impacted Boeing's financials.
Greetings, I'm Mike Trocchia. I'm an environmental engineer, an aspiring artist who loves solving problems, and one of the co-founders of the Lean Six Sigma Dojo. In just a few minutes, I will be discussing the impacts of the 737's grounding and the coronavirus on Boeing's business, and utilize the Fishbone diagram, Pareto chart, and prioritization matrix to help convey my points.
Hi, I'm Aaron Wainwright. I'm a part-time pharmacist and a full-time student at Rutgers, Newark. I enjoy traveling to art museums and a good cup of coffee. And I'm one of the Lean Six Sigma Dojo co-founders. Shortly, you will hear my presentation on the road to recovery after poor quality since the 737's grounding and further delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I will utilize the affinity diagram, PDPC chart, inefficiency summary, and a lessons learned summary to illustrate my points. Now you all should have an idea of who we all are and how we come together to make our unstoppable team.
To help aid certain aspects of our presentation, we utilized a certain methodology to give the dojo the stabilizing structure it needed. That structure is also known as the Six Sigma DMADV method, coupled with direct mixing into our presentation structure itself. Looking at each piece, the first part of our objectives were as follows: defining the goals through looking at the history, measuring quality and surrounding standards and attributes through the issues, which helped give us the foundation we needed. To continue, the latter stages of the presentation involved analyzing opportunities by examining the financials, designing main and alternative models through a multitude of different diagrams utilized, and verifying the results by closely scrutinizing the conclusions. As one can envision from the customized diagram, I hope you are able to get a solid idea of what is to come very soon. The reason the colors are mixed is to show how each phase branches into and connects the prior and future steps together. This method was utilized throughout our presentation and aided in the metaphorical connecting of the dots from concept to creation and ultimate proposal fruition to offer Boeing a true and concrete answer in regards to the major costs of poor quality that should not ever, without a doubt, be overlooked. You will find more details soon. Don't go anywhere. It's just getting started, and you've got free front row seats.
has been making the 737 aircraft for over 30 years. The MAX is the fourth generation, and problems with the MAX have compounded over time. There were a number of factors that led to the grounding of this aircraft. The timeline will show the pressure that Boeing received from its customers to make decisions faster, the lack of oversight from the FAA and other government agencies that are responsible for the safety of aircraft and passengers, and how Boeing's own hubris and reluctancy to own up to their mistakes caused the failures that eventually led to the grounding of over 500 planes worldwide. Let's start with a quick overview of Boeing. They are the world's largest aerospace company and supply aircraft to over 150 countries. Boeing operates as three business units: commercial airlines, which carry passenger and freight, defense, space and security, and global services, which includes spare orders, customer support, and training. For our project, we're going to focus on the commercial segment. There are currently more than 10,000 commercial aircraft in service, with 5,700 on order. The headquarters is in Seattle, Washington, and has three major production facilities. The first is in Everett, Washington, which is the largest manufacturing building in the world. This site produces the 747, the 767, 777, and segments of the 787, also known as the Dreamliner. Renton, Washington produces the 737, which is the focus of our project. And North Charleston, South Carolina is responsible for the final assembly and delivery of the 787. Now let's walk through a timeline of the 737. The first flight of the first generation of 737s was in 1967. Then the Classic series entered the market in the 1980s and 90s, and the 737 NG followed in the 90s and 2000s. By 2006, Boeing had started internal discussions on whether to re-engine the 737 or to replace it with a whole new aircraft. At the end of 2010, Airbus announced the A320neo. This was a more efficient version of the A320, which was the 737's biggest competitor in the market. In spring of the following year, American Airlines told Boeing that they are close to a large deal with Airbus. Now, American had previously flown Boeing aircrafts exclusively, so this influenced Boeing to decide to re-engine the 737. The decision to upgrade meant that pilots and ground crews would only need supplementary training as opposed to being certified for a whole new aircraft. It also meant that Boeing didn't have to go through new aircraft certification, which is very time-consuming. By July of 2011, American officially announced a large deal with Airbus and a smaller deal with Boeing for the next generation of 737s. The next month, Boeing announced the 737 MAX, and by November they had over 700 commitments to buy. By the end of 2015, the first 737 MAX was completed, and the first flight test was completed in January of the following year, with no reported issues. The FAA then certified the MAX in March of 2017. In May of that same year, Boeing was informed by the engine manufacturer of a possible issue with the turbines. Flight tests were halted for inspections, but were cleared within a week. That same month, Boeing made their first delivery of the MAX on the 16th, and the first passenger flight took off on the 22nd. In May of 2018, there were 130 MAX planes in service with 28 different airlines around the world. Over 42,000 flights had taken place and moved 6.5 million passengers. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air 610, flying out of Jakarta, Indonesia, crashed 12 minutes into the flight. All 189 people on board were killed. At takeoff, pilots had reported a warning indicating that the plane was in danger of stalling. They were not able to determine the speed or altitude of the aircraft and noted that the nose of the plane seemed like it was being forced downward. The Indonesia transportation industry ordered an emergency inspection of all 737 MAX 8s in the country. All planes were determined to be airworthy within 2 days. The investigations that followed began to focus on the MCAS software and the pilots' reactions to the system. The next month, the FAA planned to issue an airworthiness directive warning about the possible trim stabilizer control issues due to the faulty angle of attack indicators. Boeing argued that the operation manual described the function and how to override it, but it never specifically called out the MCAS system. Airlines around the world continued to fly the MAX 8, and Boeing continued to build more. On March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines 302 crashed 6 minutes after takeoff. All 157 people on board were killed. Pilots again reported a flight control issue at takeoff. The MCAS had been activated, again pulling the nose downward. Pilots struggled to gain control, but the MCAS was activated again and was cited as a contributing cause to the crash. Ethiopian Airlines grounded the rest of its 737 MAXs that same day. Other airlines around the world followed suit, and the FAA was the last to ground planes 3 days after the crash. In April of 2019, the FAA announced a delay in Boeing's final software package update, which was initially expected by the end of March. Delays continued to plague Boeing, and the CEO reported that he expected to submit the final fix to the FAA in September and for the grounding to be lifted in Q4 of 2019. It isn't until this point that Boeing cuts production from 52 units per month to 42 units per month. In October, the CEO of Boeing testified to Congress. He noted that the company had improved the aircraft to ensure that crashes like those of JT610 and ET302 never happen again, but he also admitted that Boeing had made mistakes. In November, Boeing completed the first phase of recertification and expected to be able to deliver finished jets to airlines with commercial flights approved in January 2020. The following month, an FAA administrator commented that Boeing's timeline was not realistic. This statement was made after testifying to Congress that the FAA analysis after the first crash showed that there was a high likelihood of future crashes, but the FAA continued to let the plane fly. This past January, Boeing halted production of the MAX. The CEO was fired and replaced after 2019 financials were reported. The financials showed that 2019 was the worst year for the company in 3 decades. Boeing also continued to face quality issues as FOD, or foreign object debris, was found in the fuel tanks, causing planes to be grounded longer. Last month, Boeing reported that planes would not return before mid-2020. American, Southwest, and United all pulled the MAXs out of their summer schedule. Over the last couple weeks, Boeing requested a government bailout in the amount of $60 billion to support the aerospace industry. The COVID-19 pandemic was cited as the main cause, which has crippled the airline industry. The 737 MAX remains grounded.
Next, I will be discussing the technical issues and faults that led to the 737 MAX crashes and worldwide groundings. In addition to the technical issues and faults, I will go over a fault tree and voice of the customer to further illustrate these points. On March 13, 2019, the FAA issued an emergency order of prohibition that revoked the 737 MAX's airworthiness. Although the Federal Aviation Administration is only a United States governing body, this acted as the de facto grounding issuance worldwide. Governments and airlines that had not previously grounded the MAX followed suit soon after. This international grounding came as a response to the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crash on March 10th, the second fatal crash of the 737 MAX airliner. To better understand this grounding, I will present the issues and faults that inevitably led to the 737 MAX's grounding and the untimely deaths of those on the Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. Indicated in reports as the official cause of the crash was a software malfunction in the flight control anti-stall stabilizing software known as the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, MCAS or MCAS for short. Initial black box reports, which I will present in the next slide, seem to validate this conclusion. However, upon further investigations, it was discovered that this is only one piece of a series of technical issues within the 737 MAX. The MCAS is a software system that was designed to correct the pitch of the plane and lower the nose if the plane angled too high and risked stalling out. The MCAS was installed specifically on the MAX and none of the other 737 models due to the higher angle of attack that resulted from the new larger and forward-mounted engines on the body. These new larger engines were far too big to fit under the wings and created one of the many issues for Boeing's engineers. In order to fix this, the engineers decided to mount the engines in front of and slightly above the wings instead of below. While this fixed the mounting issue, it in turn created a new issue. Due to the placement of the engines, these planes were taking off with higher angles of attack, and if a plane angles too high, it risks stalling out mid-flight. This critical issue, in addition to the promises made by Boeing to create an upgraded plane instead of a completely new plane, necessitated the creation of the MCAS system to correct this. This slide shows the black box data from the Lion Air Flight 610. As you can see in the lowest red and green graphs, the altitude of the plane is trending upwards, showing the typical rising trajectory of a plane after takeoff. Moments later, you can see a severe dip in the altitude of the plane. This is the MCAS system kicking in. It received a false reading of the plane's angle of attack and overcorrects its trajectory. As the pilot corrects this and climbs closer to cruising altitude, the MCAS system kicks in again, sending the nose of the plane downward. What should be a stable line turns into an up and down battle between the pilot and the MCAS system until eventually the system overcorrects too much and leads to the fateful crash. Another chart that shows this struggle is a dark blue pitch trim position that's located in the middle of the data set. Here you can see what shows an irregular fluctuation in the pitch of the plane. The pitch should be fairly steady as it trends upward, and then as it evens out, you'll see the pitch also even out. The photo on the right illustrates the AOA sensor thinking that the plane is angling upwards when it was stable and overcorrects, forcing the descent of the plane. Boeing's critical fault was their choice of speed over quality. The rushed development of the 737 MAX was facilitated by the success of the Airbus A320neo. This newer, more efficient airplane from Boeing's largest competitor forced Boeing to choose updating their workhorse 737 over building a new airplane to exceed the success of the A320neo. The MAX was essentially a response to the neo. However, since the neo was already in the market, Boeing rushed to catch up to prevent further loss of their market share. Their designers pushed out blueprints at twice the normal pace, which often led to sending incorrect or incomplete schematics to the factory floor. In addition, software engineers were forced to settle for recreating 40-year-old analog instruments into digital formats instead of innovating and improving on them. Another reason Boeing chose to update the 737 instead of create a new plane was a constraint of the FAA Common Type certification. Boeing marketed the 737 MAX as essentially the same plane with an enhanced, more efficient engine. In order to do so, the plane had to be similar enough to the last model. If not, then the model would be subject to a longer time to market and be treated and scrutinized as a completely new airplane. With this Common Type certification, Boeing sought to cut corners on their training as well, and they positioned this as a selling point. Because this plane was close enough to the previous model, Boeing promoted no expensive classroom time or costly simulator time. Instead, pilots would just have to take a 2.5-hour training course and a 30-minute self-study course on the MCAS. In theory, pilots could read about the MAX at home, take a self-administered computer course in the morning, and be ready to fly in the afternoon. In addition to Boeing's faults, there was also insignificant oversight and testing of the MCAS system from the FAA. Per FAA protocol, the actual functionality of a system is not tested. Instead, a failure condition test is administered for each system. This is essentially a forecast of what would happen if the system failed. The MCAS received a hazardous failure designation from this test. This indicated that any kind of failure or malfunction would result in a large reduction in safety margins or a serious fatal injury. Typically, systems that receive this designation have 2 levels of redundancy in case of a system failure. The 737 MAX did not have any redundancy measures for the MCAS. The FAA later admitted to lacking in the regulation of software, and the current policies allowed manufacturers to essentially police themselves. Another misstep by Boeing was their lack of safety redundancy in addressing the MCAS. With the FAA hazardous failure indication and similar issues pointed out by engineers, Boeing was fully aware of the MCAS failure potential. Boeing's response was to create an AOA sensor failure. This was a warning indication on the instrument panel that you can see on the image to the right that could have alerted pilots to an angle of attack sensor failure. The warning came with a disagree alert software that relies on an optional AOA sensor. The optional sensor was sold by Boeing for an additional $80,000, which neither Lion Air or Ethiopian Airlines ordered. In addition to this high-priced safety add-on, Boeing did nothing else to add redundancy into the MCAS software, nor did they create a check sheet, similar to one you see on the left, in their manual in case of an MCAS or AOA sensor failure. Instead, pilots were left scrambling to search for any type of answer before their plane crashed. In this fault tree, you can see the 3 main factors that led to the issues of poor quality from Boeing. They were environmental factors, human error, and equipment failure. The environmental factor that started this journey of poor quality was the release of the Airbus A320neo. This updated, more efficient model airplane from Boeing's biggest rival was immediately taking market share away from Boeing. Some of Boeing's longtime customers were already in talks with Airbus to update their fleet from the 737s to the Airbus Neo. This created a secondary environmental factor in Boeing's customers and the market, not willing to wait the average 10 years it would take Boeing to create a new plane. Human error also played a large factor in poor quality, both internally and externally. Starting internally, the key factor that led to poor quality was Boeing's poor project management. The entire project was rushed. Instead of updating additional components within the 737, like the flight equipment, Boeing focused only on improving the engine to save time. Everything else was an afterthought. This poor project management led to incomplete blueprint transfers and poor management of documentation. Externally, the human errors that led to the grounding came from the lack of oversight from the FAA. Much of the MAX's review process, the FAA either outsourced or delegated back to Boeing for review. Finally, pilot errors that led to the crash came from uninformed pilots. This human error actually falls back on Boeing as they provided insufficient training for the pilots and failed to fully inform the pilots of the potential MCAS issues. Lastly, the equipment failure, as mentioned previously, became the end result of a rushed effort to get to market and poor oversight from many of the parties involved. Finally, I present a small VOC that was compiled from internal and external customer interviews. Since I was unable to interview these engineers, techs, and senators personally, I've compiled a list of interview responses that give a good idea of how internal and external customers felt about the 737 MAX process. These comments give a good idea of what engineers, techs, pilots, and senators had to say about the 737 MAX and the issues that followed.
Hey class, so now we're going to look at how the 737 MAX crisis impacted Boeing's stock prices as well as its net income. We'll also be using the quality cost tool, the cost-benefit analysis, to weigh the costs incurred by Boeing versus the benefits. In this section, we will highlight some of the key events impacting Boeing stock prices. In October 2018, following the crash of Lion Air's 737 MAX, the closing stock price for Boeing dropped from $360 to $335. In February 2019, Boeing closed with a stock price of $440. This is probably due to Boeing scoring the largest deal in Africa, as well as delivering over 700 aircraft orders. However, in March 2019, the stock dropped approximately to $362 after a second 737 MAX plane crashed in Ethiopia, causing other regulators from other countries, as well as FAA, to order the grounding of the 737 MAX. Following that, Boeing also announced it would slow down its production of the aircraft. Boeing's stock price decreased to $326 closing price in the end of December 2019. The timeline coincided with the announcement from FAA that the Boeing 737 MAX will not be cleared for flying, and Boeing announcing stopping its production of the aircraft. And finally, in March 2020, the stock price dropped to the lowest level at a closing price of $95, after Boeing announced hiring freeze and limiting overtime to conserve cash. The current pandemic also impacted Boeing, as it received more cancellations as the COVID-19 impact airline industry. However, stock went up after news of the stimulus plan that included $50 billion in aid to airlines and potentially billions to aerospace manufacturers. The crashes of the 737 MAX affected Boeing's net income as well. In 2019, it only had a revenue of $76.6 billion compared to the $101 billion it earned last year. The drop in revenue was mainly due to the general decrease in number of orders, as well as canceled orders or conversion of the 737 MAX orders to other aircrafts, thereby reducing revenue that could have been generated from the sale of the 737 MAX. Boeing also reported a full-year net loss of $636 million. This included $5.6 billion of write-offs to compensate airlines and other 737 MAX customers for the grounding of 737 MAX. This also covered increased production costs, settlements made to victims' families from the first 737 MAX crash, as well as compensation of $100 million to the victims' families and communities impacted by the crash. Here we have identified all the costs and benefits associated with the Boeing 737 MAX. The costs include a total of $18 billion in losses, including accounting costs and increased production costs. This also includes an additional $4 billion to cover normal production costs to be incurred for shutting and restarting production. Boeing's total costs will continue to rise if 737 MAX continues to be grounded, as it will have to pay out another round of compensation made to airlines and other 737 MAX customers. There's also $100 million compensation made to the victims' families to provide them with immediate financial assistance and humanitarian needs for communities impacted by the crashes. Boeing is also facing lawsuits from Southwest pilots of up to $125 million and lawsuits from flight attendants over lost wages and other damages. There are also pending lawsuits from victims' families from the two 737 MAX crashes. So far, Boeing only settled $1.2 million each with 11 families from the first crash. And if Boeing decides to settle the same amount with the families from two crashes, that will total up to $402 million in settlement. Boeing also has pending cases from FAA with fines amounting to $9.3 billion for installing substandard parts on the 737 MAX planes. Boeing can be assessed $3,000 to more than $34,000 per violation. That could be applied to each of the more than 300 planes on which the alert didn't work. Airlines also have canceled orders for the 737 MAX after the two crashes, although some converted the 737 MAX orders. They also reduced the number of planes they are ordering with the conversion, and this resulted in a revenue loss for Boeing, as each Boeing 737 MAX plane's price tag is $99.7 million. Boeing's image has also been tarnished after the crash regarding its quality issue, and now faces more scrutiny from FAA. And the benefit is the revenue generated from the sale of 737 MAX. And we can see that the costs far outweigh the revenue that could have been generated from the 737 MAX. What Boeing did not anticipate was the cancel orders and the grounding of the 737 MAX following the disaster.
Between the 737's grounding and the coronavirus global pandemic, Boeing is being hammered on all fronts. The sources and consequences of these occurrences are countless and far-reaching and include many moving parts. In terms of parties, we have the main and neighboring businesses that Boeing works with, stakeholders and shareholders, and the general public as well. Shifting focus to the more internal aspects, we have R&D, manufacturing, supplier relationship management, corporate funds, resources, and everything else designed to keep the business afloat. In order to determine all impacts from top to bottom, a few quality tools were made use of, such as the Fishbone analysis, the Pareto chart, and the priority matrix. To the right, you will see a small preview of what is to come. These tools, when working together, characterize Boeing business inside and out and showcase some of the additional costs of less than ideal quality from start to finish. From this, it should be clear that all hope is not lost. Please rest assured, and there is a way to repair the damage done. But it will not happen overnight, as many project managers know, and it will take a great deal of time, determination, and drive to not just meet the customer's expectations, but shatter and succeed them and exceed them beyond expectation, which is what our company strives to do on a daily basis. This should enable the company to turn right side up once more and put them back on the runway to success. Digging into the meat of my presentation, we have the Fishbone analysis. Well, actually, that's a bit of a bad analogy, as there's more bone than food on a skeleton. But that being said, we will look at this as more of a skeletal outlining of the root causes behind Boeing's failures over the past few years. That was better, right? I hope so, because here we go. Let's dig in. Alas, the fishbone was a bit too large for one slide, so we had to cut it in sixths, fillet it, and devour it one bone at a time. These bones may not have too much protein on them, but rest assured they are packed with plenty of quality vitamins and minerals. So let us get into the main courses and discuss the method of effectively consuming this beast. As such, we will tackle the bones in the following manner and look at the environment, measurements, methods, materials, machines, and personnel involved in the process. Now, I just want to remind you all and urge you all to please pace yourselves and do not eat too fast, or you will not retain this golden and exciting information. The first delectable bone we will get the opportunity to nibble on to get our taste buds watering is the environment. This area consists of anything and everything surrounding the main business operations that may have an effect on the performance of the company. Now, let's go further and drill into the main sectors of this component. Within the spot, we have three main subcourses: the COVID-19 pandemic, the FAA, pushing safety, and the fact that the news tends to be negative in nature. So, the parts that form these interesting niblets include a multi-billion-dollar proposed bailout to stocks plummeting for the pandemic, lack of attention to detail and customer core details for the FAA's pushing of safety, and panning by the media to the one mistake and it's over mentality feeding into the negative news. So, this is the first part of the bone map. I hope you're hungry because there's plenty more in store. The second ever so delicious bone we will continue our glorious feast upon will be measurement. This part lays out the standards in place to effectively quantify and examine the tools set in place by the business to execute and create their products and services to the best of their abilities. The three most important sections we have are measurer's fatigue, inaccurate tools, and ambiguous measurements. The factors that lead into and define these core options range from press stress to human error for measurer's fatigue, device error to systems failing on a mere sensor for errored tools, and hard to understand results to goal miscorrelation for ambiguous measurements. These were all a part of the core pieces of the puzzle that encapsulate the tasty measurement bone. Now it is time to move on to the next piece. Stay hungry, my friends. The third part, halfway there, living on a rare bone, would be the method section. This part entails, note not actually the tail, please refer to the overview for a good shot of that, the techniques and management methods the company utilized to conduct their business. So, the main courses embodied here include flawed analysis, to failed oversight, and lastly, mismanaged safety training and analysis. The appetizers that led up to these categories include anything and everything from lack of supply chain management tools to not up to par quantitative and qualitative analytical techniques for the flawed analysis, and history lesson disregarding to key practice omission for failed oversight, and tablet main learning and pivotal training lacking for the safety analysis. These are some of the core principles that define the methods utilized here and gives us a bit of a sour knowledge-filled taste as we head into the next part. The fourth and eternal hunger-enhancing bone would be the material region. This part involves the systems and substances in place to enable seamless fluidity of control for goal of movement, which leads to steady progression and eventual obtaining. With that, let us examine the core sections available to analyze here. So we had supplier invariability, unideal hardware or software, and resource invariability. The seasonings, if you will, that led to these conclusions include lack of full operational capacity usage amid virus response, to general unreliability for supplier invariability, and old computer systems, to technical glitches for unideal hardware or software, and expensive and inconsistently priced parts and components for resource invariability. If one does not have the supplies and tools, they cannot build a plane or a 5-star meal. like this fish could have been. That being said, let us continue onward on our journey. Still awake? Good. We're almost done, but not quite yet. So don't fall asleep. I promise something awesome and amazing will happen. No, the fishbone won't explode, but something even better. You just have to keep watching to find out, I promise. Okay, so the fifth juicy bone would be the machines. These are the instruments at our disposal to accomplish our missions. These instruments for Boeing include faulty control and quality systems, defect-riddled programs, and imperfect parts and usage. The herbs and spices that comprise this part of the fish included mismanaged foreign object degree, to reuse of dated parts for the faulty system, too short time span accidents, and lack of proper system design for the defect-prone programs, and parts improperly positioned and manual control limits that defined imperfect parts and usage itself. Now, it's not a complete and balanced meal unless we discuss the best for last in the final section of the fishbone. Stay with me. For the pièce de résistance, we have the most tender and core component of any business in the world, on Earth at least. All other planets are excluded, for now. Personnel. These entities keep the corporation alive and well through adaptation and growth within the company on a consistent basis. People are the heart and soul of the organization, and in order to keep them well, one must take good care, and the company must not allow for layoffs, upper management misforecasting, and improper employees for the job type situations to arrive as best as possible. So, what exactly led to these outcomes? Well, from plant closures for virus response to billions of dollars lost from lawsuits, that does not help, and layoffs are anticipated to follow suit. So, these are never fun, as one can imagine, especially in terms of crisis. But continuing on, unclear directions and floundering leadership are also unideal and result in upper management misforecasting. Additionally, limited teamwork and lacks of problem solvers does not result in the always strive for the right employees for the position mindset and may continue to keep Boeing struggling to emerge from their mess. So, looking back on our meal, we discussed all matters that may have contributed to Boeing's situation, which include environmental, measurement, and method-related factors. This was supplemented by the latter half, which included materials, machines, and personnel, as you just heard. Well, I hope you did. So, now we are not saying that all of these matters and sections work together to contribute to the root causes of Boeing's situation. All we are saying are that these are the problematic areas and situations that may have arisen and must be dissected, gutted, and reimagined to assist Boeing in their quest to get out of the hole and to make quality products and services once again in order to restore their image to the general public. So, that being said, the next section will continue on this and conduct an analysis on the vital few and continue the analysis set forth in this presentation. So yes, if you haven't done so already, please feel free to update your social media statuses to something along the lines of watching the best presentation ever and redefining what it means to do a project on the cost of poor quality. And go ahead, grab another drink, again if of age, because the party ain't over till it's over. Now, let's look at a potential correlation between the current viral pandemic and Boeing's stock price. What's a good way to model that, you may ask? Yes, one answer is through an intense analytical and technical information-focused montage with rock music in the background. But to save your ears the damage, we've decided to do a Pareto chart instead to basically accomplish the same end result. We think, at least. So ever since the COVID-19 pandemic started hitting hard late February 2020, the airline industry has suffered on a global basis. The main emphasis would be on the vital few, which, according to our Pareto analysis, would be Italy, Iran, Spain, and China, which have the highest mortality rates per number of cases as of March 18th, 2020 at least. But please note, we've updated our research, and since then the top countries have basically remained the same, with the exception of the US grabbing the top spot. But since Boeing's top business was in the US to begin with, this does not create a major change in the cost of poor quality restoration means, as it all starts from the home base anyway. So, back to the Pareto chart itself and looking at the results, Boeing's stock price has dropped to a third of its initial level at the starting period for the end of February to mid-March. Yeesh, but fortunately for Boeing, predicted to be due to the shift in production from airplane parts to precious medical devices like face shields, their stock price has seen a bit of a resurgence and rebound near the end of March, which has stabilized a bit, and looking into early April, it has continued that way. So as such, the general public has took notice of this and responded by buying back into the company. This is the first step of the rebirth for the organization, but it is not predicted to be enough to save the company for the long haul or on its own. So to mitigate negative outcomes to the highest extent possible, potential bailouts aside, while the shift to medical devices continues, Boeing can continue to plan their 737 MAX's grounding solution smithing moves more carefully on the side. Now, that includes, but is not limited to, providing quality service to the maximum number of permissible flights during this time frame for the 4 primary affected regions, plus the USA, using the flight-worthy units. The proposed planning phase now is not concerned of whether or not they have the tools to conclusively solve the problem tomorrow. But if they can pledge that they are doing all that they can to fix the 737's grounding issues and present factual data to the public, they will be in much better shape in the interim. Then, when the outbreak is finally over, yes, there is an end in sight, don't worry, Boeing can execute their plan to save the company, with the focus being on efficiency, customer safety, and quality at the forefront, which our company strives for all the time. Last but not least, for this section, we will discuss one of the envisioned chief ways to truly restore the company. So prepare yourselves, as yes, this presentation can and will get even more intense. Since the Pareto analysis has been completed, we should now have a clear idea on what to focus on as part of the vital few mentality. So, we can apply the same principles to formulate different approaches that Boeing can, theoretically, take to properly handle recall management. The key parties that are involved in this process are the main business, suppliers, manufacturers, and stakeholders. Additionally, other areas to examine include the news media, politics, the COVID-19 pandemic itself, lawsuits, and more. Now that the ground rules have been laid out, let us examine the matrix itself. So, there are 7 categories to examine that include the following. First, we have leadership from within, which has the focus on properly planning and communicating with all internal entities to bring about the redesigned and quality engineered planes. Next, there is media handling, that has the attention placed on apologizing to the entertainment outlets and showing demonstration to the commitment to quality and sustained success. Afterwards, we have outside talent importation, which involves bringing in outside skill sets, specifically in the form of Lean and Six Sigma professionals, possibly supplemented by quality ERP systems that the company can really use to turn their business around. Furthermore, examining clientele smithing. This includes demonstrating the company's commitment to the customer, how important it is, and through safety measure reinforcement, this can be done. Continuing, one must not overlook production flexibility, which is defined by being able to turn on a dime. And we know that it isn't easy, especially in times of hardship like the current pandemic, but the company being able to make crucial medical devices during this time is a huge win. Second to last, there is supply chain unity, which involves the idea that it takes a company to make a difference, and being able to have all departments work hand in hand, from manufacturing to procurement to human resources to PD and C, is a vital process component for reform. Finally, the manufacturing engineering core has the final goal embedded within. So once outside matters are back to normal, or as normal as they can be, the ultimate test is whether or not manufacturing and engineering can deliver and create the software, hardware, parts, so that they are not only able to run perfectly together, but can truly begin the image recovery process for Boeing. Now that the categories have been laid out, let's examine the ratings. So the ratings are based on the perceived influence and abilities and how much of a factor they are and play to show the public that Boeing is committed to reimagining their business from the ground up. So, quality focus and mitigating the true costs of poor quality through safety and the clear resolution that the customer will always be their top priority are critical pillars for that bridge. Furthermore, each scenario selection represents a hypothetical functional criteria backing that the company upper management would like to pursue for each category. That being said, selection E for the customer-focused strategy was the key, as it aimed at fixing the relationship with their core business partner through increased safety, enthusiasm, and never-ending drive for quality. And, without further ado, you can now direct your attention to the final stage of our presentation. Thank you for making it this far. You're almost there, and please enjoy.
The cost of poor quality of the 737 MAX aircrafts are substantial, but the aircraft has a large following in the airline industry. In today's presentation, I seek to outline the following main points: Boeing's main problems and concerns, as well as the organization's response, and some more solutions that could be initiated to support their customers. Additionally, I will go into more detail about the proposed software enhancements for the aircraft. Further, I will provide a summary of the inefficiencies and the lessons learned from the quality issues the organization is faced with from across the board and all sides. We have now surpassed the one-year anniversary since the order to ground it. Concerns for grounding of the aircraft hinge on the required approval to unground it. Further delaying the return is the shutdown of the economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The organization has begun meeting with stakeholders trying to restore trust lost from the issue. Training and trust are among the major obstacles they face, in addition to restoring the life of the grounded fleets. They plan to update pilot training requirements and flight crew manuals to include the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation Software, or MCAS. Completion of simulation training will be required by personnel. At this time, there's only one manufacturer of the simulator. Thus, we propose they support the base of the supply to reduce shortages of the simulator, as completion of the training could further delay the return. They have prepared a 10-point plan to structurally improve the company culture of safety, which I will get to in the next slide. Additionally, they plan to deploy field teams around the world ahead of the plane's return to service to help airlines bring the fleets back to life. Undelivered planes, which is a backlog of approximately 5,000 planes, will include a delivery stream mix of stored aircraft and planes fresh off production. Proposed aircraft software enhancements involving the MCAS include the following. Previously, it failed based on input from a single angle of attack, or AOA sensor. Boeing will change the software to give the system input from two sensors before activating. Further, it will only activate if data from both sensors agree that the AOA is high. Also, previously there was no limit to how many times the software can move the horizontal tail in response to a sensor. They plan to change the software so that it activates the system only once per event rather than within multiple cycles. It is believed that Boeing's engineering safety culture was decimated starting over 2 decades ago. The decline traces back to the summer of '97 when they acquired their longtime rival McDonnell Douglas. For about 80 years before the merger, they functioned as an association of engineers. By 2000, however, the culture began to change as McDonnell culture became ascendant to Boeing. There's a documentary preceding the MAX debacle about the Dreamliner. Now I will take a moment to highlight some of the safety improvements as outlined by the Boeing 10-point plan. Many of these enhancements tie back to personnel training and restoring trust. They will implement a permanent safety committee, whereby a board of directors will oversee safety throughout the life of the products and services. Additionally, they will implement an operations safety program. This will increase transparency and visibility of safety issues and will require the chief engineer to review all safety reports. There will be a design requirements program. This program will provide detailed history of best practices and lessons learned and reinforce continuous improvement. With regard to new training capabilities, the organization will fund additional investments made to enhance flight simulation training for flight deck personnel. There's no question Boeing will never be the same after this event. Key lessons learned from this event include, but are not limited to, not to compromise product quality for cost savings or profit. Identify and mitigate single points of defect failure, and do not downplay the learning curve for implementation of flight crew software. Thanks for watching and listening to our presentation, everyone. Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to direct them to us by email, and if not, thanks again, and on behalf of this team, I would like to say thank you to my teammates and everyone that made this possible. Also, please refer to the references section for our sources and the succeeding appendix section for all the important supplementary details that could not be fit into our main presentation. Thanks again, everyone. I just want to reiterate that this was a group effort that we all worked very hard on, and I want to thank my teammates for all the hard work that went into this project. With that, take care, and I sincerely hope you enjoyed.
Here are the citations that we utilized for this project. As you can see, quite exciting. Now, here we have the appendix with supplemental information to complement the main body of our project. To help aid certain aspects of our presentation, we utilized a certain method to give the show the stabilizing structure it needed. That structure is also known as the Six Sigma DMADV method, which focuses on and also stands for defining goals, measuring quality and surrounding standards, analyzing opportunities, designing main and alternative models, and verifying the results, as you can see from the customized diagram. The reason the colors are mixed is to show how each phase branches into and connects the prior and future steps together. This method was used throughout our presentation, where applicable, and aided in the metaphorical connecting of the dots from concept to creation and ultimate proposal fruition. Thanks for watching and listening to our presentation, everyone. Yeah, does anybody have any questions though? Feel free to direct them to us by email, and if not, thanks again, and on behalf of this team, I would like to say thank you to my teammates and everyone that made this possible. Also, please refer to the reference section for our sources and the appendix for all the important supplementary details that could not fit into the main presentation. Thanks again, everybody. Hope you enjoyed.